Alright, this video I want to analyze a statement from Bruce Lee. Absorb what is useful, discard what is useless. The motivation for this video is because I saw this other video of somebody who made that statement to support the MMA. And he said, oh, that's what people are doing nowadays, they're taking Bruce Lee's teaching in the MMA, they're absorbing what is useful, discarding what is useless, and they're putting his teachings into practice. And there's no need to practice styles anymore. People don't really practice styles anymore. I just want to comment on that. The teaching is essentially talking about a sculpture. Bruce Lee would talk about like a block of clay and then just basically taking away the unessential until you come to the beauty. So there's definitely value in recognizing the importance of simplicity and getting rid of things that aren't necessary or that can overcomplicate things. But the thing is that you got to realize is that not everybody's capable of doing that. Very few people can be a true master in knowing what is useful and knowing what is not useful. Bruce Lee, that statement is true for him, but for 99% of the population, it's not true for them because they are not at his level of understanding and his intelligence and his spiritual development to be able to understand what is truly useful and what is not useful. So, I make an example of, children, they're still trying to learn about life, and they may make decisions that, hey, I like this but I don't like that, so I'll do this and I won't do that. But as a parent, you got to step in and make the decisions for them because they're not yet mentally capable, they're not intellectually capable to know what is good for them and what is not good for them. So throughout the day, they if it was up to them, they might just eat candy all day long, and that's clearly not good for them. They might not like vegetables, they might not like meats, they may not like taking showers, they may not like brushing their teeth. If it was up to them, they like to play video games all day long and do nothing else. But as a parent, you gotta step in there and be like, no, you need to eat your vegetables, you need to eat your grains, you need to eat your fruits, you need to brush your teeth, you need to take a shower, you need to get 8 hours of sleep. Like, you are the one who steps in there and brings the balance to their life. And with the martial arts, there's people that may be like, oh, this technique is useful, but then this one's not. But they are not in the position to make that decision because they lack the intelligence to actually know what is useful and what is not. Another example is, a carpenter who he might fix homes and rebuild homes from scratch, and only he will know what tools are absolutely needed and what are not needed. But if you've never built a home before and you're an amateur, then you're not going to know what you need and what you don't need. So a style is essentially almost depending on a master to make those decisions for you. It's kind of like putting your trust into a doctor, into knowing what medicines to prescribe and which ones not to prescribe. You're trusting his expertise and his intelligence to make the right decision for you. And the same thing with the dentists, and even the lawyers. I mean, people that are specializing in something that you don't know anything about, you're putting your dependency onto their expertise. So what happens is when a martial art master opens up a school, he's essentially promoting, his way as far as what he thinks is useful and what is not useful, and you are trusting in his judgment. So Bruce Lee was a great master, someone that was great to follow, so you would trust his teachings, his words, his wisdom, his thoughts. And that's why people are even following his teachings. Oh, absorb what is useful, discard what is useless. Essentially, when you follow that, you're following his methods. So he becomes like your master. And he was essentially he's the teacher. You could say that he didn't believe in style, that his way is not a style, but regardless of whether or not his way is a style, he is still a teacher. And you are learning from him. You are trusting that, what he is teaching is pointing towards the truth. And then you need to experience it yourself in order to actually realize whether or not it is truth. But very few people are going to be at that level where they can make that decision into determining what is useful and what is not. Somebody that's just very physically lazy could just be like, you know what, I don't need to lift weights, I don't need to do any calisthenics, I don't need to jump rope, I don't need to go for any runs or bike rides or swim or do any cardio at all. I could just hit the punching bag all day and I'm going to be the greatest boxer in the world. I don't need to do sit-ups, I don't need to do nothing else, just hit the punching bag. I mean, he could have that, and then he thinks that fitness is useless, and he could actually believe that, but it doesn't mean that he is right. Somebody else could be like, hey, I don't need to practice kicks at all. All I need to do is learn how to punch and punch well, and that's all I need to do to defend myself. And I don't need to learn how to kick. I don't need any elbows or knee strikes or learn how to do any locks. They could actually believe that and then just basically just eliminate the opportunities to learn any kicks whatsoever or any other techniques other than punching. But just because he makes that decision doesn't mean that he's right. So Bruce Lee's statement is basically almost acting as if people take it for what it is, it's almost acting as if everybody's capable of developing themselves to their potential based on their own understanding of themselves. But the reality is that is not true. Very few people are capable of making the right decisions for themselves. That's why we have a lot of people that are very dependent on experts. When you go to the doctor, you're depending on him. Go to the lawyer, you're depending on him. Dentist, you're depending on him. People that go to school, they're depending on these professors. They're depending on these teachers to make, certain, to teach them the right way. And then even going to, these politicians and these government officials, like you're putting your trust into them, and that teaching is true, but not true for everybody. You really have to see it for what it is. And when you join a martial arts school or you practice a martial arts style, you have to learn to, an aspect of it is learning to open up your mind and to empty your cup and to be able to allow yourself to absorb the teachings of whoever wishes to teach you. And you're pretty much trusting him that he is going to teach you what is necessary and not teach you the things that are not necessary. And also, everybody's lifestyle is different, so if you're training to be, a pro boxer or an Olympic boxer, then a lot of the stuff that they teach in MMA will not be useful for you. All those kicks, all those elbows, all those knee strikes, all those takedowns, all those chokes will be useless for you because you're not gonna. Those are not the techniques that you're gonna be executing in the boxing ring. So that there's a lot of things that can be eliminated from that. But if you're training to be a cage fighter, then other things will be useless. Like the idea of respect for your opponent will not be useful at that moment for you. Just the ideal of, having compassion for the person and waiting for them to get up, to make sure that they're ready to fight again is not going to be useful for you because it's not necessary in that cage. It's just all aspects of spirituality is not going to be useful for you in that cage. They try to take it to the extreme to express more violence in what they do, and the aspects of softness and gentleness becomes more or less more useless in that cage. So the less compassion, the less love. And then also just the techniques, you know, not being able to strike the person in the groin area, for example, is useless in the cage because it's not allowed. You know, other rules is pulling their hair or biting their nose or biting them or breaking their finger, you know, is not going to be useful for you in that cage because it's against the rules of that cage, you know. But if you compare it to real fighting, if you're fighting for survival and your life is at stake, then there are no rules of engagement at that moment. You would do whatever is necessary to protect your life at that moment. You know, if it means blinding that person, then that's maybe what you need to do. You know, if it may mean running from that person, that's what you're gonna do. Stabbing that person, shooting that person with a gun, or just doing whatever technique is necessary to survive that situation. You know, so it depends on what you're training for. You know, are you training to be a cage fighter professionally or on an amateur level? Are you training to become an actor, to be in Hollywood? Then it'd be a different type of training. You know, different type of techniques that you'll be learning that will be useful for that setting. Are you trained to be a martial artist in which to defend yourself on the streets? Then that'll be a different training than how a boxer would train. Are you trained to be a boxer? Are you trained to be a wrestler? You gotta decide for yourself, what are you training to be? What do you want to represent? And then that will be able to more clearly identify what is useful for you and what is not useful for you. You know, even things that don't even have to do with martial arts. Are you trained to be a tennis player? Are you trained to be a volleyball player? Are you trained to be a bowler? Are you trained to be a basketball player, a football player, a powerlifter, a bodybuilder? Like, you really need to know what you're training for in which to determine what is useful and what is not useful. Now, if you say that I want to train to be a martial artist, the next question is, do you even know what it means to be a martial artist? How can you train, how can you determine what is useful for you and what is not useful for you when you don't even know what it means to be what you want to be? And also to look within yourself from a spiritual standpoint, who are you? Do you even know who you are? You know, so these are complex questions that not everybody is capable of making for themselves. So that's why a lot of people are seeking out teachers or seeking out styles to learn from, because they don't know themselves. You know, so that teaching that Bruce expressed is more so a teaching for himself, not so for the public. You know, there's like a 1% of the population where this truth is true for them, but not true for you. You know, so for the example, somebody like Usain Bolt, who won all these gold medals in 100-meter dash, he's doing something that very few people in this world will ever be able to achieve. So his truth is going to be different than others. For him, he's like, you know, anything over 10 seconds in the 100-meter dash is just really slow. And that's a truth for him. But for others, you know, getting anything near 10 seconds is an amazing achievement. You know, so you need to develop your individual intelligence and your spirituality and your meditativeness in order to make that teaching useful for you. Otherwise, seeking out a teacher, a guide, who is very good at what he does, who is a real master, is going to be better for your growth. Not everybody's meant to create their own style, create their own way, open their own school, and just teach the world the way that Bruce Lee was teaching. Very few people in the world are here for that. So I think people need to learn to not allow that teaching to confuse them and distract them from achieving their potential, and just trusting and being open to learn from people that are truly masters, because that could be a barrier. You may truly feel that you don't need to learn something because you think it's useless, but in actuality it is very useful, much more useful than you ever imagine. And that is a tragedy towards your personal growth when you fail to develop in yourself. When you fail to develop yourself because your mind is in the way. Your mind thinks that it knows more than it really does. And you need to follow your heart more than you follow your mind. And not a lot of people know how to do that. So I don't think that in any way his teachings should discourage people from learning from true masters, and being open and emptying their cup. Because Bruce did make that statement, but he also had a lot of other teachings that he specified in his books and in his writings and even in his movies. Talking about emptying your cup of tea in order to taste somebody else's cup of tea. Talking about the art of fighting without fighting. Expressing the beauties about meditation. Talking about not focusing on the person pointing at the moon, but to look at the actual moon. There's a lot of teachings that he had, and you gotta put it all together rather than just honing in and focusing on just one and then allowing that to distort the real truth, which is beyond just one statement, but it's a individual experience. And once you experience it, then you'll know. But that's one thing I wanted people to really think about when it comes to absorbing what is useful and discarding what is useless. Don't follow something that you don't know. And the only way to know is to truly experience it yourself.